The UK's criminal justice system is struggling to contain the huge numbers of prisoners who've been sent to jail, and this chronic overcrowding in British prisons. And the situation has prompted the government to operate or to activate Operation Early Dawn. This is a controversial emergency measure designed to manage the overflow of inmates by holding defendants in police cells until space becomes available in prison. It's a measure that comes from the Conservative period, and it's been reintroduced because of the rising tensions following far-right riots in the north of England. It sparked debate about the sustainability and the ethics of the UK's prison system. Operation Early Dawn, in other words, is not a new strategy, no matter how it's presented today, but it's a recurring one, using a temporary solution to ease the burden on an overstretched prison system. And its reactivation highlights the significant failure in the long-term planning and the capacity management of the UK's prisons. It's something that Rory Stewart has flagged up in the past. According to the Ministry of Justice, this plan is necessary to address immediate pressures, particularly in the northeast, in Yorkshire, the surrounding regions, but it's a temporary fix, likely to exacerbate underlying issues rather than solve them. Lord Timpson, the Prisons and Probation Minister, has defended the decision by emphasising that the government inherited a justice system in crisis and exposed to shocks, and his statement reflects a common narrative among Conservative leaders, attributing current challenges to the failings of previous administrations. So the old Conservative government for 14 years was blaming the previous Labour government, and now the current Labour government is blaming the Conservative government. Critics argue that the government's own policies have contributed significantly to the current crisis. Mark Fairhurst, the national chairman of the Prison Officers Association, pointed out that the closure of 20 public sector prisons and the failure to build adequate new facilities have directly led to the overcrowded conditions that we see today. He's criticised the government's approach, both this government and the previous government, highlighting the dangerous conditions that prison staff face due to these failures. We work in the most hostile environment, and it's absolutely horrific. And of course, he's right. He's right. But the point about prisons is we need to think about the purpose of a prison. Is the purpose of a prison to keep people off the street, or is the purpose of a prison to reform people and send them back onto the street? I like to think it's the second. And there was a time when Elizabeth Fry was on our banknotes, and we were reminded all the time of prison reform. Not today, of course. The impact of overcrowded prisons extends beyond the prison walls. The activation of Operation Early Dawn means that defendants awaiting trial are now held in the local community in police cells, a practice that justice experts warn could lead to significant delays in the justice process and danger. And Mark Fairhurst has cautioned that while serious offenders would still be prioritised, those deemed less serious might face extended periods in custody before even appearing in court, leading to what he described as justice delayed. Tom Franklin, the chief executive of the Magistrates Association, echoes these concerns. He says that delays in court appearances undermine public confidence in the justice system. And while some relief is expected after September the 10th, when a new system will release thousands of prisoners early, this solution itself has been criticised as a short-term measure that doesn't address the root causes of the crisis. The crisis facing the UK prison system is not merely a matter of numbers, but reflects deeper structural issues about overcrowding, which leads to an increase in violence and self-harm within prisons, and the conditions of the prisons themselves, the how many people are stuck in a cell, the quality of the brickwork itself. The conditions have reached unacceptable levels, and the decision to reduce the proportion of sentences served by some inmates from 50% to 40% is a clear indication of the government's desperation to cut space, but it raises questions about the balance between public safety and the need to manage prison populations effectively. We need to build new prisons, and we need to build prisons that are effective and suitable for the job they're doing in the 21st century. Critics argue the government's response has been reactive rather than proactive. Of course it has. The present government has hardly been in place. But the Vice President of the Prison Governors Association, Mark Ike, has expressed scepticism about the effectiveness of Operation Early Dawn, suggesting the government has been lurching from crisis to crisis. Well, not for long, because it hasn't been in power for that long. It's picking up the fag ends of the previous administration, the failure of the previous administration to grapple with something which isn't changing. The prison population and the problems with prison haven't changed significantly over the last 20 years. They're still the same. It's just that it's not a topic that bothers most people and doesn't bother government. Out of sight, out of mind. We need a comprehensive reform of prison and of the jailing system and of the criminal legal system, rather than a series of temporary knee-jerk fixes. And while we have a Prime Minister who's got a background in that world, I think we should take advantage of it. This temporary reprieve by moving people around the country to make sure they don't, hotbedding, effectively, to make sure that there is some sort of space, effectively keeping prisoners in a car or in a van, on the move. It's not a sustainable solution, and it must cost significantly more than finding a place to put them on a permanent basis. The crisis in Britain's justice system, exacerbated by recent riots and long-standing capacity issues, requires a fundamental reset, a reassessment about how prisons are managed, how justice is administered. We must move away from short-term measures and invest in long-term strategies. We don't put people in prison on a short-term basis. We put them there on a long-term basis. Therefore, we need to manage that. And we need to address the root causes of overcrowding with sentencing reform, with increased capacity, with improved rehabilitation programs, because a lot of prisons are filled with the same people coming back again and again and again. We need to make sure that doesn't happen, which means we have to have proper education within prisons. And at the moment, the only education people get in prisons seems to be the University of Crime, when so many criminals are banged up together and miserable. The job isn't to make prison a pleasure, but there's a limit to how miserable you can make people before it self-implodes, before it becomes detrimental in itself. And the justice system needs to emerge from this cycle of crisis management and to deliver proper justice, true justice, in a timely, effective, efficient, and forward-looking manner.